Okay. Good morning, Annie. Welcome to True Hope Cast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Very interested to learn about what it is that you do: sleep, psychotherapy, trauma, pain, huge, big topics. But how are you today? What is going well?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to chat with you. Um, and so I'm in the DC area, Washington, DC area, and it's beautiful and actually not hot here today, which is a rare occurrence for, mid-August. So I'm really pleased about that, and that's going really well.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's nice to have the weather that's not too hot, not too cold, and it's nice to get those little breaks within the year. When definitely when you're expecting super hot weather, it's a nice little relief.
For sure.
Yeah. So why don't you kick us off with a little background on you, what it is that you do, who are you? Like, I'd love to just get that information, please.
Sure. So, yeah, my name is Annie, and I'm a therapist. So, I'm actually a clinical social worker, and I am licensed as a therapist. I run a small group practice, private practice, in right outside Washington, D.C. And our practice focuses primarily on treating insomnia, chronic pain, and trauma through psychotherapy and therapy based strategies.
Great. And it's called DC Metro Sleep and Psychotherapy, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And where did this clinic, how did it start? Like, I mean, it's an interesting connection: insomnia, chronic pain, people, and trauma. People might not connect those things, and also throwing psychotherapy in there. I think most people, when they think about going somewhere to sort their sleep out, they might be getting something, like maybe a new bed, or maybe some supplements, or some other things to help them sleep. So how do we connect insomnia, pain, and trauma? Like, what comes first? Like, how do most people come in and explain and display the issues that they're experiencing?
Yeah, no, this is a good question. And it's a really good point that a lot of times people are seeking a product or a, medical treatment for, particularly for both pain and sleep. And so, we really focus on evidence-based treatments. So treatments that are proven, have some research behind them that are shown to work. For these conditions that people are dealing with. And just a little bit about it. So I started out doing regular talk therapy, like a lot of other therapists do. And I had a struggle with chronic pain myself. And so part of this is me learning how this all works through a little trial and error myself. I think it's helpful to share this. I come from a family of poor sleepers. So um, I've known and been around poor sleepers. And so, this stuff is has been part of my life. And so when I discovered these treatments that are not medicine and not, medical model based, it was like amazing, and so now I'm really, really passionate about treating these things through therapy because it can really work. And so back to your other question about, well, what's the kind of relationship between these things? And the way that I see it is it's all based on the brain. So it's how our brain is working. And sometimes the symptom of insomnia shows up, for instance, as it's a symptom of the overactive nervous system response. So to be more specific, the brain being stuck in that fight or flight response in stress mode. And insomnia and chronic pain are just some of the ways that shows up, physically in our body.
Interesting. What are some of the like go-tos when it comes to like pharmaceutical medication if somebody has got sleep issues, because I think a lot of people, I think most people, unfortunately, are going to go to their doctor if they've got sleep problems or pain or trauma,
Yeah.
which they can be very helpful with that situation. But when we're talking about like the practice that you have, and you're working with psychotherapy, and you're working with kind of getting to the to the root cause of these issues, because as you say, like if somebody is constantly engaged in their sympathetic fight or flight nervous system because of there's so many different factors that might engage that constant kind of response. And even if you were to take really good quality supplements, you're not really getting to the root cause of that. You might be assisting your body to come out of that into a rest and digest situation for a period of time, but there's underlying things happening in primarily your brain that are causing you to get into that fight or flight. And that, if you're in a stress response and you think you're going to be eaten by a lion, there's no way your body's going to put you in a state for good quality sleep. But what are if most people go to the doctor with sleep issues, what are some of the primary medications that people get put on, is step one?
Sure. No, and I want to, kind of acknowledge how right on you are and I appreciate that, because I think not that many people really understand that the supplements and medications, they can really help. They can, and especially on a temporary basis, and they're amazing, but it isn't going to fix the mechanism that's happening in the brain. And so we do need to kind of retrain that from a therapy behavioral based perspective, because if we don't, it's going to keep happening. And while the medication does, and supplements, they do really help, there's still this missing piece for a lot of people. But you had asked, what kind of medications are people taking for sleep? There's a whole range of things out there. Typically people do things like Ambien, and sometimes people take things like Xanax. There's a really common one that we see here is trazodone. There's a whole range of things out there, and again, those things can help. But what I find the most often is that they help initially, or not at all sometimes. But
Okay.
if they help initially, and then people kind of start to get back into their old habits, and are, the stress response is overriding the medication or supplement.
And most people who come and see you, is it more common that they have actually gone through that type of experience with the medications before they come and see you, and they've recognized that maybe it doesn't work for them, or it doesn't do what it used to do? Or are people coming to you who, like the idea of using therapy as well? It doesn't seem super common to me that people would be like, oh, I've got sleep issues, chronic pain and trauma, maybe I should go and see a psychotherapist to sort those things out. That doesn't sound, I mean, I do, because I feel like that's where I am in my life now. I'd like to look at those type of therapies that are going to get to the root cause, and a practitioner like yourself are going to understand the full rounded effects of what is going to influence my sleep. So most people coming through your door, have they experienced this conventional approach first, and then they're coming to you for, I don't know, better help?
Yeah, often that's the case, particularly when it comes to pain. I don't see very many people trying a therapeutic based approach first. So I would say almost all the time with chronic pain, people have been through the ringer with it, and they've tried everything. With sleep, it's a big range. Most people have tried something medically. They've gone to the doctor. They've done a sleep study. There's a whole range of things. Maybe some people don't want to take sleep medication. But I mean, I have people who've had, sleep problems since getting COVID, for instance, and it's been 6 months. Or I've had people who've, had sleep problems for 30 years. So it depends on the person. More and more people are understanding the therapy I use for insomnia called CBT for insomnia. And so more and more people are doing, learning about that. And I think that's good. And that's part of why I like talking to people about it, is because it's so helpful to know what's out there.
And with this kind of trifecta of sleep, chronic pain, and trauma, is the goal to work with that trauma to improve sleep to reduce the pain? Is that kind of Have I missed that? Have I mixed that up, or is it different for different people?
So, some people are coming in with just insomnia, right? And so we start by working on just the insomnia. And through that process, getting to know them a little bit better, we uncover, well, actually, there's a lot of, historical trauma in there that would be helpful to work on. So, typically, I think people come in with one area of focus to work on, and thinking about it, they kind of see one thing as the biggest issue or the biggest obstacle that they're dealing with. And then, some people only have that one thing. I see most commonly that there's definitely these overlaps with other areas, but it depends. It depends on the person. And when someone's coming in with any kind of sleep related problem, I like to focus on that first, the sleep first, because it's more shorter term. You can get sleep in a better place more quickly than you can some of the other things. And so I tip, that's my go-to, is to start working on the sleep. Once sleep is a little better, it's easier to focus on the other things.
When people start putting your recommendations or the practices that you recommend them to take home, because obviously they're coming to the clinic with you and they're with you and you're discussing things, but then they go home and they're spending a significant amount of time away from you, which for some people can be difficult to get motivated at home when you're surrounded by all the familiar things that make us behave in predictable ways, I suppose. Is it do people find it difficult to take those practices home, or is it like is it a constant having to like really work with you on like a frequent basis to really start implementing these behavioral changes? Because we know like humans aren't brilliant at changing those like learned behaviors. And when we're talking about something like long-term pain or insomnia or trauma, we're talking about things that have been within someone's life for decades in some cases.
Yeah.
So that's really hard to crack through that like really solidified neural network of of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that that lead to these traumatic this trauma and this pain, and then ultimately like a big lack of sleep. And we obviously know a lack of good quality sleep is going to have a large effect on pretty much every system in your body. So do people find it difficult to make these changes? And when they do start to make the changes on a consistent basis, do they find results quickly?
So from the sleep perspective, it's actually easier because of the way the therapy is set up. So it's kind of like a program. So what I have them do is start with a sleep diary. So they're tracking their sleep. So like that is a way for them to be accountable, actually. And generally speaking, I don't. Outside of the CBT for insomnia, I'm not a huge fan of sleep tracking because I think it calls attention to sleep. It puts your focus on it sometimes in a negative way. And that can be counterproductive. But for the purposes of what we're doing, and I have the sleep diary set up a certain way so they can't really focus on it, or it's just they do it and they don't see the information. But that creates some accountability. So plus it's very structured, you do this, you do that. And, there's kind of a step-by-step process to, or a set of rules and guidelines to follow. And so most people, are able to follow it to some degree. There's some things are harder than others for people to follow, but generally speaking, this kind of therapy is actually relatively straightforward to follow. It's a habit change. So there's resistance, we face resistance trying something new that we don't feel great about sometimes. But for like many, many people, it's actually pretty straightforward.
That's great. And I feel that most people who probably come through your door and work with you, they're pretty self-motivated to make changes and to do that, because you say like a lot of them have gone through a conventional system and they recognize that that's not really worked for them. And they really genuinely want to sleep better and have less pain and and work through the traumatic events that they might not necessarily consciously connect with those issues. So it probably works well that people are really looking to change. They're self-motivated, and it's now's the time for them to start making these changes that are going to lead to those outcomes that they're looking for. When you talk about tracking sleep, what type of things are you looking at? What information are you looking for there?
So I'm looking at how long it's taking them to fall asleep. So that's what we call it, sleep latency. So the amount of time it takes from when you get in bed to when you're falling asleep. And it's just an estimate that people are making because we never really know how long that takes. It's based on like what we think is happening. Um, how much they're awake in the middle of the night. And if they're waking up early in the morning, let's say earlier than they intend to. But I also am interested in overall, like one of the big things that we're tracking is how much time are they spending in bed? Because we don't want to be spending time in bed unless we're asleep. So that's very clear with us. So that's a big one. And then overall, just what their habits look like. So when they do wake up, what do they do? Do they lie there and try to sleep? Do they get up? What's their typical routine around sleep looking like?
What do you think about like the sleep apps and smartwatches and things like that, and the information from there? Is there any helpful information with that we can take?
Generally, I recommend not using it for sleep. Um, and they're okay at tracking sleep. Give you a general picture, but they can't really, they're tracking your heart rate. They're not looking at what's going on in your brain. If you go to a sleep lab, it's a whole different setup. They're really tracking it, and they can really see at a sleep lab. So I think that what I've seen with sleep trackers is sometimes people will wear their, smartwatch to bed and then, kind of obsess about the data and, oh, did I get this? It's saying that I didn't get this. And that kind of creates its own issue, actually.
Yeah.
So they're great at heart rate movement and there's some amazing things about them, but overall I find them more unhelpful when it comes to sleep.
Yeah, I think they can become, just putting way too much focus and energy on that information. As you say, like it's just trying to tracking heart rate, and that varies between individuals, and it's not super, super accurate when it comes to the full data that you would get, let's say in the morning. I used to have one, and I got like that very, very quickly. I was like, really into the app, looking at the ups and downs. And I just I didn't like the idea of this watch being on me, talking to my phone all night while I'm trying to sleep. I don't know the ins and outs of that connectivity and how that, that messes with the frequency of like what is necessary for my brain to sleep. I'm not quite sure about that. I don't know, but I just didn't like the idea of this watch being kind of like on my person, always on, and like, go. I didn't like the idea of that, to be honest. But
Yeah.
is it common for psychotherapists to work with sleep, or do you have kind of like a unique approach to what you're doing in your practice?
That's a good question too. There's a field, and it's new, so there aren't that many people working in this field, but it's called behavioral sleep medicine. So it's actually, I'm a social worker, but there's more psychologists who are in that field than any other type of provider. Um, but more and more social workers. I mean, I think, anyone who experiences, like, if as a therapist, when you see someone change and you can see it pretty quickly, it's amazing. And you feel like, oh my gosh, I can really impact people in this amazing way. And so it's growing. It's a growing field because CBT for insomnia is a very highly researched therapy, and the outcomes are really positive. So like 70 to 80% of people get better, which is really amazing.
Wow.
So is it really common? No, it still we need more people doing this. But, there's places like the VA, for instance, that are starting to really use CBT-i, and other kind of big agencies that are starting to implement this more. So, and really roll out training for this, but it's still, not that widely known.
With the pain issues that people come in,
Mhm.
is there a common type of pain in in a part of the body, or the actual pain itself, whether that's like, I kind of I kind of think of like pain and discomfort on different scales rather than like a scale of pain. I feel like I've got
Mhm.
this like discomfort pain, like how much mind discomfort, and then pain's a different section for me. But are people coming in with like the patterns of the pain that people are coming in with, and is that like connected to insomnia in some kind of way?
I mean, I see them occur together really, really frequently. But with pain, I think probably the most common type of pain I see is back pain.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know from a statistical standpoint what, terms of like chronic pain, what most people are suffering with, but I would say back pain, migraines for sure, is a big one. And then like neck, shoulder pain, like that kind of like, overuse pain. Um, those are probably the most common things that I see. Um, but there are others. I mean, some of the therapy that I use for chronic pain is called pain reprocessing therapy. And I think about also symptoms like GI issues, for instance, or, like stomach pain, or even other types of GI issues as being related, all related to the same, kind of underlying issue that the brain is experiencing, right? So, or even something like fatigue, unexplained fatigue. So if someone comes in with a symptom like that, like I'm looking at it in the same way. And as long as they've ruled out, they've been through testing and they've ruled out other problems. And in some cases, from a pain standpoint, if they have like a bulging disc or something like that, I see that differently because typically bulging discs don't cause pain, but they're being treated for it, right? So it depends on the diagnosis. We kind of have to look at it critically.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, everyone's going to be different, and as you
Hmm.
say, everyone's perspective on their own pain can be very different from other people. I think that we also like learn to deal with quite a large amount of discomfort or pain that we just end up kind of like dealing with, and that's just like our normal, and we get used to it.
Yeah.
So that can really kind of distort how bad something might be for somebody. Are there any complementary like practices or other therapies that you work closely with, or you might recommend somebody try along with the therapies that you're going with, like chiropractic, or acupuncture, for example, massage? Do you refer people out to these type of practices?
Um, I do sometimes, yeah. And I like to work with providers that really understand what I'm doing. So, like for instance, in the DC area, there's some great physical therapists who really understand the brain perspective and understand how the role the brain and the nervous system play in kind of creating and perpetuating pain. So I think any one of those type of providers can be complementary if they see it the same way. So let's say we have a provider like that who doesn't see it the same way, and they kind of feel around in someone's back and they're like, uh-oh, this looks bad.
Yeah.
That's going to kind of counteract what I'm trying to work on. So I want to be mindful. I want to connect with them and make sure, hey, look, do you see it this way? um, because I have actually had that happen with clients I'm working with. And the whole goal of pain reprocessing therapy, or PRT, is to separate fear from the physical sensation. And if someone's reinforcing that, it's going to be unhelpful. So I think you kind of understand what I'm saying. As long as they're like-minded, yes, absolutely, it can be helpful.
Yeah, that's great. I think one of the greatest things for, I mean, I'm 38 now, and I didn't really have a relationship with pain rather than like soccer injuries. But
Okay.
I'm 38 now. I've got 2 small kids, and like my first kid is 3. He's 3 now, but he like messed my back up. My body was
Oh,
not used to carrying a child around, and I was probably quite unconscious because I was carrying him on one side. And
um,
now, and like for a good 5-6 months, my like back would be in bits, in quite a lot of discomfort, and I'd have to do quite a lot of work to help that out. Like warm baths and stretching. But one of the best things that I did for it was using my meditative practice to actually just like sit and like, rather than really wanting the pain to like go away or do something to just get rid of it, I was kind of talking to it and connecting with it and really like feeling it. I definitely do that a lot when I'm in bed and I'm asleep and I'm like still and it's dark and I've got the sensory overload of like the world is not quite
mhm.
there, and I feel the pain. And it's very interesting because once you put your energy into something like that, I genuinely feel like you can make have a different relationship and a different connection with what that pain means to you. Because
Yes.
I think it's all messages. I think that there's my my back pain is a connection that I need to be more aware of my posture. I need to be more aware of like how I'm holding my shoulders back, and I'm standing up at my desk today, and I'm trying to stand up straight. And I think they're all just like little messages here. And I just wonder, like, when you speak to your clients about pain, what's the type of approach you have to it? Because like, if you're going to go to, I just want to say, a bad chiropractor, all they want to do is just try and manipulate you to just like
Mhm.
relieve some of that pressure to reduce the pain a little bit, which might be very helpful for somebody who's in significant discomfort. But at the end of the day, like, it's a band-aid. That pain's coming back because someone's going back into their car, they're going back to their office, they're going to sit down on the sofa, they're going to do all the things that created that pain in the first place. And it's just not, you're not creating an understanding of why that pain is there and what that pain means. So what's the type of approach you have with your clients when it comes to understanding their own pain?
Yeah. No, this is a good point. And I really appreciate what you just said because you kind of nailed it. um, it's, that's what perpetuates pain. So sometimes pain can start from an actual injury, right? So it can begin with like a broken foot. And then what happens is your brain starts to develop what's called these conditioned responses. Like it learns that when I step down, I feel pain. I step down, I feel pain. And so then it starts to kind of take on a course of its own based on your brain's habits and patterns, right? So, you know, holding your child may have kind of been that initial kickstarter, but then the learned responses start to kick in that your brain has. So unwinding the way that works. And a big part of it is sitting with the discomfort. So that sensation is there. I feel it, but it's not alarming. Nothing's terrible is happening. I'm feeling that and I can tolerate that because it's just a sensation. It's not dangerous. And so that fact and that, kind of point is a big overarching theme in this pain reprocessing therapy.
Yeah, and we have these beautiful, when you look at the biology of the body, it's all pathways, it's all communication, whether that's within your cells, using hormones, you using neurotransmitters, using electricity, using chemicals. And if I've got pain in my lower back, that's just like that message traveling up all the way up through my peripheral nervous system to my central nervous system, communicating with the brain, letting me know that I need to put some attention to that area. And I
Yeah.
think if we have a bit more of an understanding of like what that pain is, how it's getting to my brain, like that, I just think we can just start creating a softer, more compassionate understanding about like what's actually going on in your body. And yeah, the fact that we like go straight for painkillers or anti-inflammatories, or we like just do as much as we can to just like ignore it or to just like take it away right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not going to have there's not going to be no long-term benefits of that type of approach. And that's why I'm so thankful that practices like yours and therapies like yours are out there, supporting people to get them back to kind of connecting and understanding their own brain and body a little bit better, and how they can serve themselves going forward in many different aspects of their lives. If you start getting connected more with your mind and your body, and you start understanding that, you're very powerful. Then you can do many different things, and you just got this bigger connection with yourself. where you are in the world and what you can do. And I think that's only going to benefit people going forward. I've got a question about like myths about sleep. Like, what are people
Yeah.
misunderstanding about like sleep and what it means? I've got an example of so I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I did that for
Mhm.
many years before I started working with True Hope. And one of my questions based around sleep was, like how quickly does it take for you to fall asleep? As we spoke about before, that's an important question. And a lot of people who are coming to me with pain and inflammation, they were telling me, "Oh, my sleep's awesome. I like lie down on the bed and I pass out like immediately." And I think a lot of people, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, this is just my understanding of it, but people associate that with having a good sleep pattern.
Mhm.
I understand like there should be this period of maybe like 5 to 15 minutes where we actually like fall asleep rather than just like passing out through exhaustion. I'm sure there's a genetic component, and some people just like have the ability to just kind of pass out. But
Mhm.
there's a big difference between like falling asleep and then just like crashing out. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. You know, so part of the therapy that I do for sleep is so there's a piece of it that's called sleep restriction. So we're actually restricting sleep to some degree in order to make people feel very sleepy. So at the beginning of therapy, that's the goal is to fall asleep faster for some people. I mean, I have people who it takes them 2 hours, they come in and they're up for 2 hours just lying there. And so what we say is really anything under 20 minutes is our goal. So if it's between 5 and 15 minutes, that's great. I'm not concerned if someone's falling asleep really fast. I would be interested to see how tired are they during the day. So if this person's really, really tired and sleepy all day, then that's another piece that we would look at. If they're fine all day, or reporting that they're fine and they're falling asleep that quickly, well, it's not too much of a concern. Um, but you had asked, what are we getting wrong about sleep? And there's there's a bunch of these that may surprise you that I think maybe will be helpful for people. I'm hoping they will be. Um, but this whole 8 hours thing is really a big myth that everybody needs 8 hours. And you, as a holistic nutritionist, can probably relate to the analogy I use for this, which is it's like saying every single person needs to be on the same diet, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't work. That's not the way. We're not all the exact same. So generally, most people need between 6 and 9 hours. Some people really do great with 6 hours. That's what their body needs. Um, there are short sleepers who need less than six. And those are, people who typically have this genetic kind of short sleep um, condition. But it's not bad. That's what their body needs. So it's more about listening to your body rather than trying to meet a goal. Um, so that's one thing. And generally, the idea that more sleep is better overall, tends to be the way people see it. So if I'm tired, I'll just get in bed early. But the problem with that is it creates this like inconsistent sleep patterns. Either I'll get in bed early or just try to sleep late. I'm just trying to sleep when I can. But if we have more consistency, so I go to bed at a certain time or later, and getting up at the same time every day, no matter what, is more helpful for regulating sleep than just trying to sleep when you can. Um, the other thing that I think people focus on, and it's so common to read about this, is that lack of sleep causes so many issues. And so we know that not sleeping well is not good. We feel tired, but we don't want to start to associate, oh no, if I don't sleep, then all this bad stuff is going to happen, right? Because how do you really separate stress from sleep and anxiety from sleep? If it's really hard to do that. So oftentimes the worry about sleep just exacerbates the whole problem. And so it's often not the sleep alone in isolation. it's all like the worrying and the emphasis we're putting on it. I need it to look this way. Because as you know, you have two young kids, right? New parents aren't, kind of having heart attacks all the time or all the scary things that we read about. It's if we have short-term sleep loss, because that's what happens with new parents, right? You're tired. It's not fun. You feel foggy,
Yeah.
but you're not having the typically you're not like afraid of not sleeping in the same way because you're just desperate for it.
No,
Um,
no, that makes total sense because I also feel like when you're about to become a new parent, your body recognizes that's going to happen, and it's going to start biochemically changing things for you, so you can get through that time. But yeah, like especially the first 6 months to a year of new kids is absolutely wild, and then once you get through that bit and you can reflect on the fact that you've accomplished so much and you've kept this human alive for 12
yeah.
months, you can be like, oh my gosh, I can do so much on quite little sleep, and you can actually do quite a bit. But it's obviously, I like to think of these things, it's just going to be a phase, and then things will
Mhm.
change, because sleep is very, very important to me.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
but yeah, it's serious business, like having young kids and like that whole sleep deprivation thing. And do you have a lot of like new parents that come in and like are really worried about the fact that their whole sleep routine is completely flipped upside down?
Yes, it's a common time for people, to experience sleep issues is, parenthood. Also, another one is like retirement because there's all of a sudden a lack of structure and, the consistency and routine you used to have is not there. And then COVID, brought this up for people too. So there's these typical things I see when we have a shift in our change or routine, like travel or health issues, or, there's these common things that throw sleep off. Um, but, typically with new parents, it's a process, and you kind of get used to sleeping with like, a lighter sleep, right? Because you got to be aware of it's a different type of sleep than you were doing before. Because if they cry, you have to be,
Hmm.
aware of it. But it's not like it's temporary, and you can change it. You can work with kids on their sleep. You can start to, do behavioral things for kids. So there are things that really help, and it's a good lesson to learn because the parents that I see tend to be like a little more flexible with their thinking. I know I don't need 8 hours every night because I just went through 6 months of that. Um, and so if you can let go of what you think it needs to look like, it's easier to make progress.
Yeah, I think especially with like the of how we change as people when we become parents, or we get, I don't know, we move in with somebody, like those
Mhm.
patterns are all going to change, and we're going to evolve, and we're going to adapt, and the body is like really good at being able to do that. And yeah, having the mindset and the understanding to like take back and rationally think about, okay, this huge thing's happened, it's now in my life, like a lot of my energy and focus is now on this. Things are going to be different, it's my sleep and all these other types of routines are going to be different, but we can adapt to that, and we can certainly do different practices to kind of help along the way. And I think, yeah, putting some of those practices into young children to be able to work with them as individuals and what they might need, and yourself, then you can certainly get through quite seemingly very difficult times.
Yeah.
You mentioned about some of the like evidence-based therapies that you use. Can you give us some examples of that? Like what's been like, what's really got solid science and evidence behind it when it comes to improving sleep and reducing chronic pain?
Yeah, so there's two main therapies that I had kind of touched on is for sleep. What I use is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBT-i, and yeah, the research is really great. So it shows, I think, like the average is something like 70 to 80% of people of people get better. So that's really high for therapy, you know, and typically we're talking about between 4 to 8 sessions. So it's really short term. And just to give you like a little overview of what CBT-i looks like is, so we have people keep the sleep diary, as I had mentioned, and then there's a set of rules, and I can just give you like a quick overview if that would be helpful.
Certainly, please.
So the kind of things we're talking about are not having a clock in the bedroom. So that helps to detach like that thought process of how long do I have? And we don't, if we set an alarm and we have it somewhere else and we can't see it, we'll still wake up at the same time, but we don't need the marker of time. Making sure that we use the bed only for sleep. So that means no reading, watching TV in bed. So we're not opposed to those things before bed, just not in bed. So we're trying to create an association. The bed is for sleep. And then the idea of if you can't sleep, get up and get out of bed. So lying in bed is kind of the worst thing you can do when it comes to sleep.
Okay.
You want to have as little time in bed awake that that you can manage. So, you know, give yourself 15 to 20 minutes of trying to sleep. But that's it. That's the maximum. Waking up at the same time every day, no matter what, and going to bed at approximately the same time or later. So we're not like when I work with people, I set a window and that's their window and they can go to bed later, but they still have to wake up at the same time. And if they get less sleep, they get less sleep.
Sorry, just a quick question there. When you recommend people not to, it makes total sense to me now. I've never really thought about it, but obviously the longer you stay there, you lie there looking at the ceiling, the more frustrating you're going to get. And if there's a clock in the room as well, it's just going to, you know, send that into overdrive. But what would you recommend people do then if they're like 15, 20 minutes and they can't get to sleep, they're lying in bed? Like what would you recommend they go and do?
So I'm, you know, pretty open with this. I mean, any kind of quiet activity. So there's a couple of things that aren't helpful, like work. Like if you're working, it just kind of tends to, you know, kind of spin your brain up in a more negative way, or, you know, anything that's more like stimulating is not ideal. But like any quiet activity, reading, even watching TV, as long as it's like a light, easy, something that's light and easy. You know, sometimes people like to like knit or, you know, something, do a puzzle, stuff like that. It's kind of individual, but really it could be anything as long as it's not a stressor. Like don't pay bills, right? Because you can get really stressed.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of things that people might not think are okay are actually okay. The difference is you don't want to do those things in bed. So find somewhere else that is separate from the bed, kind of its own little space.
Yeah. It's like what type of nervous system do you want to be really using before bed? You know, you're going to go watch a thriller, or you're going to go and watch David Attenborough talk about fish. Yeah. Like what's going to be more beneficial for you? And, you know, I think about transitions in my day. Like I like to have a transition from breakfast, family time in the morning to coming down into my office to, you know, get focused into work, you know, because it's, you know, only going to benefit me to get the best out of my time when I can do that. So I have like a coffee and I spend a few minutes like breathing and just like, then I come downstairs and I'm in this mode. And then the same when I finish up and I want to go upstairs, I transition. Yeah. And I feel like I'm pretty lazy with this because when I get into a show, I'm not really into it. And then I won't watch anything for like 5 months. So I'm into a show at the moment. So I'm like, our kids will go to bed pretty asleep by like 8 o'clock. And then like, I like to watch a couple of shows, but I don't like doing that because I know that it affects my sleep and it affects my day the next day. So I'm trying to cut it out. So I'm trying to transition using, you know, like different things. Like my wife and I will read books. We'll talk about different stuff. We'll, you know, just sit there, have maybe a glass of wine and look at the mountains, you know, like it's, did you recommend these like transitional periods rather than like going from, you know, your day straight into sleep, or is it the same when you wake up, like this bit more of like a a little bit more of a dance into the next phase of your day.
I really love that. And in particular, one of the CBT-i rules is to have a buffer zone, 1 to 2
Buffer zone.
hours.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think it helps in the morning. That's not, that doesn't have to be part of CBT-i, but yeah, especially in the morning, what can help also is getting sunlight, direct sunlight, and kind of that cue for your brain. Hey, it's light. It's time to be awake. But, I do think that those transitions are really important, because I see a lot of people who are, really, hard workers, and they're working until 11 o'clock. And then they're, like, why can't I fall asleep at 11:30? Well, that's a big ask for your brain to just stop and then put that away. So we do need that. I think we need that. I think the one thing a lot of people do also think, though, is TV is not good before bed. And, what I really think is, well, it depends, right? Because a nature documentary, just like what you were saying, is really relaxing for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And if that can help you to kind of let go of your day in a way where, just sitting there quietly doesn't, do that. Because, sometimes if you're trying to sit there quietly, you can get more and more frustrated. It depends on the person and on the day. But, I think something like that actually can be helpful. Again, as long as you're not doing it in bed, and, having that separation. But, I really do think some certain types of things can be helpful in winding down like that.
Yeah, I think for me it's a compounding effect. Like, if I'm doing that every night or 5 nights a week, like, it's compounding. My brain is confused, and it's having to get used to that transition that I'm choosing for those 5 days. But when it's like just a couple of days a week with with like 2 or 3 days in between, it's very, very different. Because you were touching on, like you said, people like working till 11 o'clock at night, and then they expect to fall asleep at 11:30. We have to be thinking about what the body is doing and what it has to do to put you in that different nervous system. It's it's having to actually, reduce and break down a lot of hormones and neurotransmitters that are, flooding around the body. Then it has to start ramping up the production of other ones, which has to go around the body, and it's not obviously not like a light switch. These things have to have time to be able to manufacture. And if you're somebody that does like work a lot till quite late, it's going to be difficult for your body to be able to like shut that down. To say you've got like the screens going on like until quite late at night. And yeah, it's just a tricky thing for the body to do. I was going to ask you, just kind of coming up to like the 50-minute point here, and I don't want to. There's so many questions I've got about sleep. I think we should just get you back on so we don't miss out on any other things. But I want to talk to you about like sunlight and exposing your face, your eyes, your body to sunlight to help your brain and your body like regulate kind of like with the sun and the moon and the darkness to help you sleep better.
Yeah. So, we're supposed to be able to do that. That's look at the circadian rhythm, right?
Yeah.
Like the cues that your body has, that it should be starting to get sleepy. Like, so at night, as the sun goes down and it gets darker, we're supposed to, release more melatonin at that time, which gives you that cue. Hey, it's time for sleep. And for a lot of people with insomnia, that's not happening so well at night. So morning, getting outside, getting that direct sunlight does help. It does really give your brain that cue, even as little as like 15 minutes in the morning to, just give yourself that, reminder. It's daytime. I'm supposed to be awake. It's okay. Even if you're really tired, you didn't sleep great, that still helps. So the more that you can do that, keep your wake time consistent, get a little, light in the morning, it's helpful. It's important.
Yeah, there's some super strong research in regards to getting outside, like within the first hour of waking up. I know for me, after listening to a really cool podcast about that exact thing, and I live in a part of the world where like at 6 a.m. for the last month and a half, it's been like, beautiful sunshine outside and blue skies. So when my son decides to get up at like 5:55 or 6 a.m. or whatever, we just like go straight outside, pretty much get naked, and say hi to the sun and do some stretching and just like be out there for like, 10 to 15 minutes just to like begin the day with that type of exposure. And it just makes me think, obviously that would have been a very normal situation for, humans 100, 200,000 years ago. So yeah, I think that's a really powerful practice. And it's a good transition. It's like hello to the day, and it's just spending that 5, 10, 15-minute period allowing your body to, gently go from being, kind of unconscious in darkness to, waking up in the morning, getting prepared for the day. After doing that for like a week and a half, I felt like a 30% increase in my energy throughout the day. Like I felt it real quick, and there was no doubt that it was that early exposure that was really doing it for me. Yeah, I have so many questions in regards to chronic pain as well, and like what's important to know. I think we should get you back on and talk about that, because I don't want to rush it. It's such an important point because so many people are suffering from chronic pain, and I think it would be really good to crack down on what people should know about their pain and when they should be looking at like emergency care, or when they could be really looking to work with a psychotherapist to talk about, traumas and pain and how and sleep and how that's all connected. I don't want to rush that because that's a very, very important, valuable topic. So we'll get you back on to talk about that. So where can people connect with you and learn more about your awesome work in DC?
So, yeah, they can go to my website, dcmetrotherapy.com. And, we're a DC based practice, DC, Maryland, Virginia. Some of us are working in other places as well, so it's worth asking. And then more recently, I created like an online course for chronic pain for people to engage that can't access therapy. And I'm going to be working on one for sleep too. So I'm excited about that as well. So for people who, aren't necessarily able to get therapy or aren't in that area.
Do you work remotely with people? Can people have sessions with you on the internet?
So yes, but because I'm a licensed therapist, so there's licensing guidelines from state to state. So there's usually if somebody contacts us, we just try to do a little research on where they're located and the licensing rules. So sometimes in other places, but yes, we do a large chunk of what myself and the other therapists do is teletherapy.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, I'm going to make sure that people can connect with you in the show notes. Are you on social media as well? Is there a place I can send people?
Yes. So Instagram, dc.metro.therapy is a good one. Facebook, I'm not as active, but it's there too. Instagram is more active.
Yeah, I feel like it's the same for a lot of people these days. Instagram's where it's at. Well, Annie, honestly, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about all those amazing topics. So important. Everybody sleeps. Everyone's got a relationship with pain, and trauma is kind of, everyone's got a relationship with trauma as well. So I think what we've spoken about today is relatable to everyone on the planet. So I really appreciate you coming on, talk to me on the show, and just what you do out there. Like, I think these type of therapies, the connection with the sleep, the trauma. I had a really interesting conversation with another psychotherapist last week who is talking more about like critical therapy and talking, just taking the psychotherapy, just evolving it, changing it, like making it more like about the embodied person and their whole experience rather than like a narrow focus on one particular aspect. So happy that you're pulling all of these really important aspects together. It's awesome. So yeah, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate your time, Annie.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to come back.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll certainly get you back on the show. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, that's it for this episode on True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. I'll make sure that there are links in the show notes so you can connect with Annie and see and learn a little bit more about what she's doing over there in DC Metro Sleep and Psychotherapy. But that's it. Leave us a review on iTunes if you're listening to on that. But thank you very much for listening. This is True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. We'll see you next week. That was awesome.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.